Have you ever looked at your life and wondered why your flaws scream louder than your strengths? Have you ever felt broken, useless, or ashamed of the cracks you try so hard to hide? If so, then listen closely, because the story you're about to hear will change the way you see yourself forever. There is a moment, somewhere between sunrise and silence, when the world is still waking and everything you've been hiding begins to whisper. Your insecurities, your scars, your failures, all the things you think make you less than. And in that quiet moment, you might ask yourself, what if my imperfections mean I have no purpose? Today, I want you to hold that question gently, because we're about to take a journey to a small, peaceful village tucked between rolling green hills, where time moves slowly and wisdom grows like wildflowers. In this village lived a farmer, an old, gentle soul whose eyes held the kind of kindness that made people feel safe. He wasn't rich in gold, but he was rich in understanding. An understanding born from years of watching life rise, fall, struggle, and bloom again. Every morning, before the sky even knew what color it wanted to be, this farmer walked down the dusty path toward the river. Over his shoulders, he carried a long wooden pole. On each end hung a clay pot. One pot was flawless, smooth, polished, perfectly shaped. Water stayed in it as if it were proud to be held. The other pot was cracked. A thin fracture ran down its side, the kind that looks small from far away, but feels enormous when it belongs to you. Every day the pots traveled with the farmer. Every day the cracked pot leaked. And every day the cracked pot wished it could be anything other than what it was. But that's where our story begins. Because what the cracked pot didn't know, what you might not know yet, is that sometimes the things we hate most about ourselves are the very things that make the world more beautiful. So, breathe in, clear your mind, and listen carefully. This isn't just a story about a pot. This is a story about you, about every flaw you've ever covered up, every insecurity you've carried like a secret, every moment you felt unworthy, broken, imperfect, or invisible. But before we uncover the truth behind those cracks, let's step into the life of the pot who believed it had no value. Morning in the village arrived like a soft whisper, golden sunlight spilling over rooftops, weaving gently through the leaves of tall trees, painting the earth in warm, honey-colored light. Birds stretched their wings, the river breathed, and from his wooden cottage, the wise farmer stepped out carrying the 2 clay pots he trusted every day. The perfect pot glowed in the sunlight. Its surface reflected the morning sky, smooth and proud. But beside it hung the cracked pot, dull, tired, and heavy with quiet sorrow. As the farmer walked toward the river, the cracked pot felt the familiar ache in its heart, or whatever piece of clay served as one. Because with each step, droplets of water slipped through its fracture, falling silently to the ground. The cracked pot knew. Every day it knew. And every day it hated itself for it. By the time the farmer reached the river and filled both pots with fresh, cool water, the cracked pot had already begun whispering the same painful thoughts. Not again. I can't even do the one thing I'm supposed to do. I'm nothing but a burden. As they began the walk back toward the farmer's home, the perfect pot held its water proudly. Its shape was strong, its purpose clear. It walked in quiet confidence, its surface glistening like it was carved from perfection itself. But behind it, the cracked pot could already feel the drops slipping through its side, first slowly, then steadily, rhythmically, like a heartbeat reminding it of its own inadequacy. Villagers who passed by admired the perfect pot. They nodded at its gleaming figure. They spoke about how reliable it was, how consistent, how flawless. But their eyes often skipped over the cracked pot, as if it wasn't even there, as if imperfection made it invisible. With every step, shame tightened its grip around the cracked pot's spirit. It watched the ground beneath it grow damp, watered by its own weakness. It watched the farmer's shadow stretch across the path, patient and calm, though the pot believed it didn't deserve such patience. "Why does he keep carrying me?" the cracked pot wondered. "Why doesn't he throw me away? He must be too kind or too blind to see how useless I am." The perfect pot, noticing the water trail behind them, lifted its chin slightly, proud but not cruel, confident but distant. It didn't mean to boast, it simply existed without cracks. And next to perfection, imperfection always feels louder. By the time they reached the farmer's home, the cracked pot had lost half the water it carried, half its worth, half its purpose. And no matter how gently the farmer set it down, the pot could not silence the voice inside, pleading for forgiveness for simply being what it was. Day after day, the story repeated. The walk, the shame, the slow, painful dripping of self-worth falling onto the dirt path. But what the cracked pot could not see was that something extraordinary was happening right beside it. Something soft, something colorful, something quietly miraculous. It would take time and courage for the cracked pot to see the truth. For now, it only felt broken, and perhaps you do too. But what if your cracks are not your failure? What if they are the beginning of beauty? The cracked pot was about to learn the truth that would change everything. And maybe you are too. The next morning came with the same soft glow, the same gentle breeze drifting through the village, the same birds calling out as the farmer began his daily walk toward the river. And once again, hanging from the wooden pole were the two pots. The perfect one shining effortlessly, and the cracked one already trembling with quiet dread. The cracked pot felt every judgmental glance, even from the passing wind. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever seemed to. As the farmer dipped the pots into the river, filling them with cool, refreshing water, the cracked pot whispered an apology in its heart, an apology it had repeated so many times it no longer remembered the first time it said it. "I'm sorry for my weakness. I'm sorry I can't do what I was made to do." The perfect pot, resting confidently on the farmer's shoulder, didn't say a word. It didn't need to. Its flawless presence spoke loudly enough. This is what a real pot looks like. This is how a pot should be. And so the walk home began. Step after step, the cracked pot felt water trickle out, first a droplet, then a small stream, then a steady rhythm of loss. Each drop felt like a piece of its dignity slipping away. Villagers once again admired the perfect pot. They praised its shine. They complimented its strength. One villager leaned in close, pointing at the perfect pot with admiration. She said, "What a beautiful pot! Not a single flaw!" The perfect pot glowed. And then, as always, their eyes moved away, past the farmer, past the path, past the trees, past the cracked pot. Not a single word, not even a nod. It was as if the cracked pot didn't exist at all. Invisible, insignificant, unworthy. That was how the cracked pot felt. Every drop of water that leaked through its fracture echoed a painful truth it had come to believe. I am not enough. I will never be enough. By the time they reached the farmer's house, the cracked pot was nearly empty, its purpose spilled out and wasted across the dusty path. And when the farmer gently placed it down, the pot wished, truly wished, it could simply shatter and disappear. But instead, it endured. Another day, another failure. And deep within its fragile clay heart, something began to break. Not a physical crack, but something far more painful. Hope. The perfect pot, meanwhile, rested proudly, full to the brim. The contrast was unbearable. Each following day, the feeling only grew heavier. The cracked pot began to dread the sun rising. It dreaded the walk. It dreaded the whispers from villagers about perfection and usefulness. It dreaded the perfect pot's effortless confidence. And more than anything, it dreaded itself. When it looked inward, all it could see was a broken object pretending to be whole. But the world had yet to reveal the truth, and in its suffering, the cracked pot had no idea that its life was already watering something meaningful, something it couldn't yet see. The burden of imperfections still weighed heavily on it, but the story was only beginning. The day everything changed did not begin differently. There was no special breeze, no unusual sunrise, no sign that fate was about to shift. It started like every morning before it, quiet, predictable, ordinary. And sometimes, that's exactly when transformation begins. The farmer lifted the two pots onto his wooden pole and started the familiar journey toward the river. But on this particular morning, the cracked pot felt something inside it collapse, an exhaustion deeper than weariness, heavier than sadness. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending to be okay, pretending you don't notice the stairs, pretending the pain doesn't matter. Upon reaching the river, the farmer filled both pots once more. As the cracked pot felt the cool water flow into it, a single thought rose up, one it could no longer push down. I can't do this anymore. As the journey back began, the dripping started instantly, just as it always had. But this time, the sound of water falling to the ground felt unbearable. Every drop was a reminder of its failure. Every drip pierced its soul like a quiet, relentless accusation. Useless. Broken. Not enough. Halfway up the path, the cracked pot could no longer stay silent. With a trembling voice, it finally spoke. Farmer. Its voice was barely a whisper. Farmer, I need to tell you something. The farmer paused mid-step. His gentle eyes turned toward the cracked pot. Yes, my friend, he said softly. The cracked pot felt its fracture pulse, as if the truth itself were pushing outward. I'm so sorry, the pot began. I don't understand why you keep carrying me. I'm broken. I leak. I fail you every day. The words poured out like water, raw, painful, uncontrollable. You work so hard to fill me, but by the time we reach your home, I'm nearly empty. I'm not helping you. I'm not fulfilling my purpose.
I'm nothing but a burden." The cracked pot's voice cracked with emotion. "You should throw me away," it said finally. "I'm useless to you." Silence fell over the path. The perfect pot looked on with a mix of curiosity and discomfort, unsure what to say. But the farmer simply smiled. A warm, knowing, impossibly gentle smile. He set the wooden pole down and knelt beside the cracked pot. "My dear pot," he said, touching its fractured side with compassion. "You have carried this sadness for so long." The pot trembled. "I've watched you suffer quietly, but you have misunderstood something important." The cracked pot hesitated, afraid, but hopeful for the first time. "What do you mean?" it whispered. The farmer stood slowly, lifting the pole back onto his shoulders. "Walk with me," he said, "but this time, look at the path. Look closely. Watch what happens because of your crack." The cracked pot didn't understand. It didn't know what the farmer meant. But as they began walking again, something shifted. For the first time in its life, the pot looked beyond its own shame, beyond the dripping water, beyond the dust. And what it saw was only the beginning of a truth so beautiful it would change everything. The cracked pot had never questioned the path before. Shame had always kept its gaze lowered, fixed on the dust beneath it, too afraid to look anywhere else. But now, with the farmer's gentle words lingering in the morning air, it lifted its eyes. And that was when it saw something it had never noticed. Color. Not a hint, not a whisper, but a vibrant, breathtaking river of color stretching along one entire side of the path. The cracked pot gasped internally. There, blooming in soft waves of pink, yellow, purple, and white, were flowers. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Wildflowers of every shape and shade imaginable, swaying gently as if welcoming the pot with open arms. Their petals shimmered with dew. Their scent filled the air with sweetness. Their beauty stretched farther than the cracked pot could see. "You see them now," the farmer said softly as he continued walking. The cracked pot stared in disbelief. How are there flowers here?" it whispered. The farmer smiled as the petals glowed beneath the rising sun. "All this time," he said, "as we walked this path together, you thought your crack made you weak. But look around, my friend. You have been watering life." The cracked pot's fracture trembled, not from pain this time, but from confusion. "Watering?" it asked. The farmer nodded. "Every drop you thought you were wasting," he said, "fell gently onto the seeds I planted along this path. Seeds only you could nourish. Seeds only your crack could reach." The cracked pot looked again at the flowers, this time with new eyes. Their colors seemed to glow brighter. Their fragrance seemed to swell. Their existence suddenly felt connected to it, deeply, intimately. "But," the pot whispered, "I didn't know." "I know," the farmer replied. "I watched you suffer, thinking your flaw made you useless. But your crack is the very reason this path is alive." A soft wind drifted through the flowers, making them dance as though celebrating the pot's awakening. The cracked pot felt something warm spread through it. Not water, not sunlight, but something it had never felt before. A flicker of worth. A whisper of purpose. A seed of hope. For years, the farmer continued gently, I have walked this path with you. The perfect pot carried its water faithfully, and that is its strength. But you carried water to the earth, and that is your strength. The cracked pot stared at the blossoms that stretched behind it like a ribbon of beauty woven from its own flaws. Each bloom, the farmer said, is your gift. For a moment, the cracked pot couldn't speak. The world felt still. The colors felt brighter. The air felt clearer. It had spent so long believing its crack made it broken that it never realized its greatest flaw had been creating beauty every day. Every drip, every drop, every moment it felt like a failure had been a moment of giving life. The cracked pot's heart swelled. It didn't know what to say. It didn't know how to thank the farmer. It only knew one thing. It would never see its crack the same way again.
Let's stop here, the farmer said, as they reached a bend in the path where the flowers grew even denser, taller, and more colorful. Here the blooms rose almost to the farmer's waist, their petals brushing softly against the cracked pot's clay surface. The pot trembled, overwhelmed. Why didn't you tell me?" it asked, its voice fragile. The farmer knelt beside it, placing a gentle hand on its worn clay. "Because you needed to see it," he answered. "Not with your eyes, but with your heart." The cracked pot felt itself soften. For the first time, it felt seen, not overlooked, not pitied, but truly understood. I thought I was failing you," the pot whispered. The farmer shook his head, smiling. "You were serving me," he said gently, "just not in the way you expected." The pot tried to understand. "I filled you both every morning. The perfect pot brought water to my home, and you brought water to the world." The cracked pot's fracture glowed in the sunlight, no longer looking like a wound, but like a mark of identity. "Your crack," the farmer continued, "is not a mistake. It is a gift only you possess." The cracked pot felt a rush of emotion, a mix of relief, awe, gratitude, and something deeper. Pride. Softly, the farmer brushed aside a cluster of flowers and pointed. "Look here," he said. Between the blossoms were sprouting herbs the farmer used for medicine. Small plants with rich green leaves, alive because the pot had unknowingly watered them every single day. "These herbs heal the villagers," the farmer said. "Your crack brought them life." Further down, butterflies circled brightly colored petals, fluttering around the blooming trail of beauty the cracked pot had unknowingly nurtured. "These flowers feed them," the farmer whispered. "Your flaw feeds life." A silence fell, a heavy, beautiful silence, filled with newfound meaning. I did all this?" the pot asked, its voice trembling with disbelief. The farmer nodded with a warmth that felt like sunlight. "Yes," he said, "you did. Every morning, every step, every drop. You gave what you thought was your weakness, and it became your greatest contribution." The cracked pot felt a wave of emotion wash through it, years of shame melting away, replaced by a powerful rising truth. It had worth. It had purpose. It had always mattered. Tears, imaginary or real, filled the pot's heart. "Farmer," it whispered, hoping its voice wouldn't break. "Thank you for not giving up on me." The farmer lifted the pot with gentle hands. "My dear friend," he said softly, "I never carried you because you were perfect.
I carried you because you were needed." The words sank deep, deeper than any crack, deeper than any flaw. A new warmth filled the cracked pot, something like peace, something like self-acceptance, something like self-love. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the path of flowers, the cracked pot realized something profound. Its flaw wasn't just acceptable, it was meaningful, beautiful, purposeful, a miracle disguised as a mistake. And from that moment on, the cracked pot would never see itself the same way again. Its journey of shame had ended. Its journey of understanding had begun.
There comes a moment in every journey when the world stops feeling like the enemy and starts feeling like a reflection, a mirror, cold, honest, and impossible to argue with. For him, that moment arrived the night the storm rolled in. The village slept under the weight of thunder, but he lay awake, eyes open, breath shallow, mind spiraling. Every failure, every retreat, every fear he had buried came crawling back like shadows hungry for light. He sat at the edge of his small wooden bed, staring at his trembling hands. Hands that once held dreams, hands that now held excuses. The storm outside began to shake the walls, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside him. He whispered into the darkness, "Why am I still here? Why am I still trying?" There was no answer, only his heartbeat, thundering like the sky. He walked outside into the roaring rain. Wind slapped against his face, water soaked through his clothes. But he didn't care. The storm felt honest, truthful, alive, just like the fire he had been trying to reignite. He stood before the old well at the center of the village, the place where elders meditated and sought clarity. The rainwater inside it rippled violently, distorting his reflection. He leaned in. For the first time, he didn't look at the boy he used to be. He looked at the man he was becoming. Not a hero, not a chosen one, not a legend. Just a person who had survived everything life threw at him. And suddenly, he understood. The world wasn't waiting for him to succeed. The world was waiting for him to take responsibility. He didn't need approval. He didn't need applause. He didn't need permission. He only needed the courage to face the truth staring back at him. He placed his hand on the rim of the well and whispered 4 words that would shape the rest of his life. "I choose my path." At that moment, the storm did not calm, but his mind did. He walked back home, steps steady, heart quiet, purpose reborn, not from pride, but from clarity.
Dawn arrived slowly, as if the sky itself wanted to witness his transformation. The clouds were still heavy with rain, but a thin line of gold cut through the horizon, soft, hesitant, but undeniable, just like him. He rose before the birds began to sing, before the village stirred, before doubt could creep back into his bones. Today, he returned to the mountain, but this time, he wasn't walking toward punishment, he was walking toward purpose. His breaths formed white clouds in the cold morning air as he climbed. His legs burned, his shoulders ached, but there was something different, something fierce, burning behind his ribs. That something was resolve. Halfway up the mountain, he paused, not out of exhaustion, but out of awe. For the first time, he felt the mountain wasn't testing him, it was teaching him. Every stone under his feet whispered a lesson. Every gust of cold wind carried a message. Every steep path challenged him to rise higher. And he listened. Because now he understood. Strength wasn't something you waited to feel. Strength was something you decided to build. When he reached the clearing at the cliff's edge, he closed his eyes. He could hear the wind, the river below, the world spinning, alive and vast. Then, suddenly, the fire within him roared back to life. Not the reckless spark of youth, not the desperate flame of fear, but a deep, steady, powerful blaze fueled by everything he had endured. He clenched his fists and breathed deeply, letting the fire settle into his spirit. "I'm not running anymore," he said softly. "I'm rising." And for the first time, the mountain felt small. His dreams felt close, and he felt unstoppable.
The path beyond the cliff grew narrower, more rugged, and more unforgiving. Few dared to walk it. Even fewer returned unchanged. He stepped onto it with a steady breath. This part of the mountain was known as the Test of Silence, a place where the world went quiet, where even the wind held its breath, where every traveler was forced to face the noise within their own soul. As he walked deeper, the silence thickened. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant echoes. Only the rhythm of his footsteps and the low hum of his heartbeat. At first, the quiet felt peaceful, but soon it became something else. Memories he thought he had buried began to rise. Failures whispered through the stillness. Doubts slithered out from the corners of his mind. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive. It was speaking. And it said, "You are not enough." He paused. His chest tightened. His breath grew shaky. This wasn't a test of strength or speed. This was a test of the mind, the battlefield where most people lose long before they ever begin. His thoughts fought against him, dragging him back into old fears, old wounds, old versions of himself he had long tried to escape. But then he remembered the storm, the mirror, the fire he had rekindled. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I hear you, but I do not obey you." His voice echoed through the silence like a strike of lightning. He kept walking. With each step, doubt weakened. With each breath, fear loosened its grip. With each moment of stillness, his mind slowly, painfully began to sharpen. He reached the heart of the silent trail, a place where a single ancient tree stood tall and twisted, its bark carved with markings from countless travelers before him. He touched the trunk. It was warm. Etched into its surface were 4 simple words: "Silence reveals the truth." And in that moment, he understood. Silence wasn't the enemy. Silence was the doorway. Silence was the teacher. When he stepped beyond the quiet trail, he was not the same man who entered. He had confronted the loudest enemy, his own doubt, and he had walked through it alive. By the time he reached the open plateau above the silent trail, the sky had transformed.
Soft rays of light broke through the clouds, painting the world in gentle gold. Air thinner, colder, but purer, like the first breath of a newborn world. He stood at the edge of the plateau and looked out. Below him, the valley shimmered. Mountains stretched across the horizon like sleeping giants. Rivers drew silver lines through the earth. Everything felt bigger than him. And yet, for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt connected, as though every step he had taken, every failure, every struggle, every lesson was leading him to this single moment of clarity. His purpose wasn't hiding at the end of the mountain. His purpose was being shaped by every step of the climb. He sat on a smooth stone, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply, letting the world speak to him, letting the journey whisper its lessons. He remembered the boy he once was, the one who dreamed without fear, the one who believed he was meant for more, the one who got lost along the way. And he whispered to that boy, "I didn't forget you. I'm becoming you." A warm breeze washed over him, almost like an answer. Suddenly, something shifted in his chest, something powerful, something ancient, something that had been waiting patiently beneath the years of hesitation and doubt. Purpose. Real, unshakable purpose. Not the kind fueled by ego, not the kind borrowed from others' expectations, but the kind born from truth, pain, and a soul rebuilt from the ground up. He rose slowly, hands clenched, jaw set, eyes shining with new fire. He could feel the world pulling him forward, not gently, but with force, with urgency, with destiny. He whispered, "The world won't shape me. I will shape myself." The plateau felt brighter, the horizon felt closer, and he felt ready. Ready for the highest, hardest part of the mountain, the part where legends are made and ordinary souls become extraordinary. His awakening was complete. Purpose was no longer a dream, it was a vow he would carry into the final ascent. The final stretch of the mountain was the steepest yet, a wall of stone rising sharply into the sky, jagged and merciless. The wind roared like a beast awakened, hurling dust, cold air, and shards of ice against him. Every step forward felt stolen, every breath felt like fire. But he climbed. Not because he was fearless, but because he had finally learned the difference between fear and surrender. Halfway up the last ridge, his legs trembled. Not from weakness, but from everything it took to get here. The storms, the broken reflections, the silent battles within his mind, the path of wounds and lessons. He reached for a ledge, his fingers slipping on its frost. For a moment, he hung there suspended between sky and ground. And in that suspended moment, the mountain asked the question every soul must face at the edge of greatness. Why continue? The wind fell silent, as if waiting for his answer. He closed his eyes, feeling the ache in his muscles, the burn in his lungs, the weight of his journey behind him. Why continue? Because he was no longer climbing to prove something. He was climbing because he was becoming something. He drew strength from the cracks he once hated, from the pain he once ran from the voice he once silenced.
He lifted his chin and whispered into the roar of the wind, "Because I am not done becoming." With a surge of will, he pulled himself up, hand by hand, breath by breath, step by step, until finally, after what felt like a lifetime, he reached the top, the summit, where heaven seemed close enough to touch, where clouds drifted below his feet, glowing with golden light, where the world felt impossibly vast, yet perfectly still. He stood there, tired, trembling, but undeniably alive. And for the first time, he didn't feel broken. He felt whole. Not because he was flawless, but because he finally understood. His cracks were never weaknesses. They were the openings through which his strength had grown. He looked out into the endless horizon and whispered the truth that had taken him an entire lifetime to learn. Nobody is perfect, but I am still worthy. I am still enough. And for the first time, he believed it.
As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the earth, he began his descent, not as the person who started the journey, but as the person he was always meant to be. And his story becomes yours now, because somewhere inside you, there is a mountain you've been avoiding, a truth you've been scared to face, a crack you've been hiding. Maybe you've felt worthless. Maybe you've felt broken. Maybe you've believed the lie that your flaws make you less. But listen carefully. Your imperfections do not diminish your value. They define your path. They sharpen your strength. They shape your purpose. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your courage, your honesty, your resilience, your beautifully imperfect soul. So when life feels heavy, when doubt whispers in the dark, when your inner cracks feel too visible to hide, remember the lesson the mountain taught. Your cracks are not the end of your story. They are the reason your story matters. You are worthy even when you feel broken. You are enough even when you doubt yourself. And the world is brighter because of the light that shines through your imperfect, beautiful cracks. Stand tall, walk forward, climb your mountain, not to reach the top, but to discover who you become along the way. Because nobody is perfect, and that is exactly what makes you powerful.